Good morning and welcome
Right.
to Unity Kent Sunday service for April 26, 2020. I'm Reverend Patty Becker, and I am the spiritual leader of Unity of Kent. And our worship assistant this morning is Leo O'Neill, and our musician is Adam Cohen. So I invite you to open your hearts and minds to the offering this morning as Adam opens our service with the song, Come Everybody.
Morning, all. Good to see everyone's smiling faces this morning. Please join along from home, because I think you all might know the words. Come, come everybody, come everybody, come everybody. Everybody's welcome in the house of the Lord. Sing our praises, sing our praises, Sing our praises, everybody's praising in the name of the Lord. Troubles are defeated, blessings are repeated. Only love is heated in the house of the Lord. Everyone's respected, no one is neglected. Only love's reflected in the house of the Lord. Only love's reflected in the house of the Lord. Come, come everybody, come everybody, come. Come everybody, everybody's welcome in the house of the Lord. Sing our praises, sing our praises, sing our praises. Everybody's praising in the name of the Lord. Troubles are defeated, blessings are repeated. Only love is heated in the house of the Lord. Everyone's respected, no is neglected. Only love's reflected in the house of the Lord. Only love's reflected in the house of the Lord.
Thank you, Adam. And it's true, everyone is welcomed this morning in our service. I'm so glad that you have chosen to be with us this morning. It's a beautiful Pacific Northwest day, and I find myself immersed in gratitude for it. It's a little bit overcast. Earlier it was sunny, and then before then it was overcast, so it's a mixed bag, just the kind of thing that we've come to expect living here. Unity of Kent is an open and welcoming congregation, inviting people of all ages, creeds, colors, and lifestyles to come join us on the path of spiritual discovery. We promote a philosophy of practical spirituality, and this spirituality is based squarely on the teachings of Jesus and also the core principles of New Thought. We believe in each person's spiritual authority and know that by applying spiritual principles to our everyday lives, we create and experience more and more good for ourselves, for our world, and for everyone we come in contact with. And so, as is our custom, I would like to open our service with prayer. So wherever you are out there, if you just make a little shift in consciousness, you may want to close your eyes to minimize distraction. And taking a deep breath and just relaxing into this morning's service. Breathing in and breathing out. Knowing that you're not here by accident this morning, that your presence here with us is by divine appointment. That there is something this morning that is particularly meant for you to hear, to experience, and to realize. The one presence and the one power that we call God is our ground of being. And it expresses as each one of us, filling ourselves and our world with light and grace. And it is this light and grace that we claim as our own this morning. And so we open our hearts to a fuller experience of just what light and grace means for us. Blessing all those in our lives who we love, and knowing that right where we are is the perfect place. And so with that, I am immensely grateful. And I ask you to join me in gratitude that we are allowed through this medium to come together and to know the truth for ourselves and one another. And so it is. Amen.
Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Peace inside my mind, God and only God is moving me. Peace inside my mind, God and only God I live to be. Peace inside my mind, God and only God is moving me. Peace inside my mind, God and only God I live to see. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Peace inside my heart, God and only God is moving me. Peace inside my heart, God and only God I live to be. Peace inside my heart, God and only God is moving me. Peace inside my heart, God and only God I live to see. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Peace inside the earth, God and only God is moving me. Peace inside the earth, God and only God I live to see. Peace inside the earth, God and only God is moving me. Peace inside the earth, God and only God I live to be. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om.
And so I welcome Lee as our worship assistant this morning.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Here we are again, live on Facebook. I'm glad you could all join us. I hope you're all alive, awake, and aware, and healthy, staying home, doing the social distancing, and hopefully soon we'll all be together again. I'd like to start with our statement of faith. There is one presence and one power in the universe and in my life. God, the good, omnipotence. I trust and align with that power of goodness now. I'd like to ask everyone to say a little prayer for Rita Bailey. She had a minor stroke, but she's doing very well. Maybe even signing in with us today, I'm not sure. But if you just keep her in your prayers this week, that would be great. And direct person is clear and straightforward. Direct as a virtue is associated with being candid, truthful, exact, and deliberate. A direct person is neither pretentious nor scattered. Rather, he or she proceeds directly towards their intentions. And I really think right now, directness is the best thing we can ask for from our federal government. We have a few announcements today. Starting this Tuesday, you can join us live for 11 o'clock prayer circle. And then on Wednesday, you can join us again live at 10 a.m. for a spirit talk with Reverend Patty Becker. I'd also like to remind you all that next Friday, our unemployment taxes are due in the amount of $1,600. So if you feel called to adding a little more to your tithe this week, that would be a blessing. We did get an extension on the property taxes for the duplex, so they are not due till the end of May. And actually the property taxes take care of themselves. Now I would like to read the daily word. This Sunday it's called Release. I release all that does not contribute to my highest good. John's gospel tells of Jesus restoring life to his friend Lazarus, who had been dead 4 days. As Jesus cries out, "Lazarus, come out," his friend emerges from the tomb, burial cloths still covering his face and wrapped around his hands and feet. Jesus says to those who have gathered, "Unbind him and let him go." Even after a spiritual resurrection, I may remain bound, like Lazarus, by thoughts, ideas, feelings, or habits that keep me from the full experience of freedom. Through my divine power of elimination, I release negative feelings, dissolve error thoughts, and free myself from habits and actions that do not serve my highest good. I am no longer bound. I am free. The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, his face wrapped in the cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." John 11:44. Thank you, and make it a great day.
And so, as you know, this is the time in the service where we pray over the prayers in the prayer box that were we in our building, they would have been collected during the reading of the daily word. And so in consciousness, let us just hold that the prayer concerns of one another. The joy of being in a spiritual community is that we give one another spiritual support. And unity is a foundation on the power of prayer and the belief and the experience of prayer working in our lives. And so I ask you to close your eyes and to visualize our prayer
I'm going to go ahead and turn it over.
Mentally, and to extend your energy towards the highest and good of each one of our congregation. There is one presence and one power in the universe, in our lives, in our community. We call this presence and power by many names. We call it God. That God is all there is, that the oneness of God is our wholeness and our oneness. It is also the wholeness and oneness of every situation and circumstance that draws our attention away from the truth. That the presence and power of God is the very life and love of our loved ones, and it is the compelling force of rightness and balance in all of our lives. And therefore, I ask you to join me in accepting the right and perfect outcomes for each prayer in our prayer box. That these prayers are, are the result of personal energy to the concerns of all those who are asking for prayer. And to stand firmly in our faith that each one is being manifested in truth according to each one's highest and most perfect need. That we are confident of this prayer activity in one another's lives, so much so that it is our pleasure to give thanks and to let go, and to let God be God in all situations and circumstances. And so it is. Amen.
Saw a story on the evening news. Said the seas in Italy have never been this blue in the last 10 years. Said the Easter weekend passed, no boats polluting, greener skies at last. And I stopped to think, it's kind of funny how all these The little things are all we miss. Inside here in this last month, the news, it never ends. Turn it all off. In silence we breathe again. Took a walk outside today. Can't remember a sky not gray. Hello, spring. Watch the river flowing past, rooting my toes in the green, green grass. Curled up in dirt. It's kind of funny how all these little things are all we miss. But inside here in this last month, the news, it never ends. Turn it all off, in silence we breathe again. Inside here in this last month, the TV never quits. Turn that all off, and in silence we breathe again.
Well, hi again. This morning I was up before the sunrise. The sun doesn't rise until about 7:20, I think. But I looked out and I have an eastern view, so I see it coming up over the canal and over the hills on the other side of the water. But this morning there was a cloud bank there, so even though at the sunrise time, I knew the sun was coming out, but it couldn't be seen. I was at the table having breakfast looking in that same direction, and in about 30 minutes, it rose. It came above the cloud bank, and then it flooded my eyes. It flooded the whole scene with really bright light. This morning, I'm going to be talking about going into the silence. And I was telling you about sunrise because in many ways, going into the silence is very much like the experience of the silence and about cultivating the practice of going into the silence. Even though we are spiritual beings, even though we cultivate spiritual practices, and even though we mentally accept the reality of our spiritual natures, we lead very physical lives. We know the right words to say, we know the right thoughts to think, we know what we are taught, we know instinctually within us that there is something beyond our physicality that draws us to itself. We feel it. And yet, we are so immersed in our physical lives. Our very physical lives are greatly informed by our senses. We believe that we know things to be true because we have seen them, or because we have touched them, or because we have heard them, or smelled them, or tasted them. We feel our physical reality so deeply and constantly that it becomes the measure of our beingness, not our spirituality, but our physicality. We know about our physical selves, we engage in we know about our spiritual selves, we engage in the spiritual life. We even have spiritual experiences, but for most of us, it's not the primary reality within which we live our lives. sensations are. As a matter of fact, it is not uncommon then, because we are so immersed in our sensational life, that we tend to gauge the vitality and the significance of our spiritual lives through the lens of our sensual experiences. Several months ago, I taught a class in mysticism, and the desire of the students attending was to experience or to have a mystical encounter. I find that a lot of the time what people mean by that is to have some sort of extraordinary experience. That a mystical experience is, for many people, defined as having a vision, or to be in an altered state, to be uplifted and carried outside of a normal experience, and then placed in an environment of extraordinary, magical kind of atmosphere. And that this kind of experience represented for them, or for anyone who is looking for that, a spiritual attainment, and that a mystical experience becomes an evidence, the evidence of spiritual evolvement. That having a mystical experience was somehow proof of higher consciousness. And so we sought that, and we have various motivations for seeking this. Many of us want proof that we take so much of our spiritual lives on faith, which is not surprising. But beyond that, we would like some evidence and some proof of spiritual existence. Many a saint and mystic and spiritual practitioner suffered greatly when they encountered periods in their own lives where they could not feel the central presence of God. Many lives of saints and ascetics started with a mystical experience that was extraordinary, and that then it turned their lives to a very intentional cultivation of more spiritual experiences of that kind. And oftentimes those experiences left the people, left the mystic, left the practitioner. And there would be long periods of time when there would be no sense of closeness with the divine. Sometimes that would be called the dark night of the soul, or a desert experience, or a crisis of faith. I have gone through personally several times in my life of what I would term a crisis of faith, or a desert experience, and it brought on real suffering. There was a real disturbance within me. My suffering resulted by trying to connect with my spiritual life like I do with my physical life, sensually. And when the sensual sensations were not there, I came to doubt the existence of God itself. This is why developing a practice of going to the silence is so hard, because it takes us out of our element, out of our natural element, out of our physical human element, and puts us into our true nature, which is our spirituality. The silence is the most advanced of all unity teachings. It is the medium in which and from which our true nature, our Christ, expresses. And we hear that term quite a bit in our teachings and in our classes, going to the silence. And it's kind of a nebulous term, because what is the silence? What is it? How do we get there? What does it feel like? How do we know when we're in there? And what are the benefits of it? We lead very active lives. Our minds are going all the time. To be alive is to think. We are so used to our busyness, not only in our physical lives, but our mental lives, that it becomes our normal lives. Only when that busyness is interrupted do we realize how caught up in doing we really are. And in some cases, how uncomfortable it is to be being. And this past month of quarantine has brought that into sharp relief for many people, taking out of their usual doingness and being squarely confronted with beingness in some cases, brings up questions and reassessments and reevaluations of what is important to me and how am I to proceed and how can I establish balance. Some people, I would imagine, have rushed in to fill the quietness with some sort of other activity, while others have leaned back into it with a deep breath and a sense of relief. The silence, though, is just not slowing down. It's just not being quiet. It's more than a deep breath and leaning back into an armchair. It's not a state or a certain level of activity. It's not a process of or for demonstration. The silence is a state of consciousness. It is a turning of the mind away from the outer, away from sensuality, away from the world of things perceived through our senses, and sometimes turning away from prayer based on having sensual experience to that which is in consciousness and eternal. In other words, that which is in our inner reality. Turning away from the world of form, of physicality, to the realm of spirit, to the realm of pure being. The purpose of being in the silence is interior discovery through revelation. Revelation of what? Revelation of oneness, of our Christedness, of our true spiritual nature. We speak about it, we can talk about it, but I'm wondering how deeply, even for myself, do I actually experience it? Do I actually let myself go there and be in nothingness, to be in non-doing, to experience the presence, to experience myself as pure being, as the Christ? The purpose of going to the silence is to awaken our understanding. The silence opens up the mind to new avenues and pathways of consciousness, of a consciousness that leads to illumination, or some would say enlightenment. This week I've been doing some reading in one of the books by Joel Goldsmith called Leave Your Nest. And I'd like to read some of the things that he has said that has struck me. Jesus taught that the kingdom of God is within, but we continue to seek and pray to a God outside of ourselves. The first lesson we must learn is that God is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. When we learn that, we begin to expect an unfoldment or revelation from within, rather than a contact with something outside of ourselves. We must make the transition from the person who is seeking truth, seeking good, and seeking life eternal, to that individual identity, which is itself the source and the center of infinite good, to the revelation of that individual identity, which is the blessing, not receiving a blessing, but being the blessing. The way to restore normalcy, harmony, and abundance is not to pray to God to increase supply or to answer prayer, which is already greater than we can use, but rather to become consciously at one with that source so that it can flow. The only legitimate prayer, Goldsmith says, is to say thank you. And then, sitting in the silence, in communion with the gentle divine presence that is already within our own being. This presence will not be added onto us, will not be an increasement for us. It will be revealed as within us, having already filled our being our own true identity. So the silence is a state of consciousness and non-awareness. It is non-doing. It is always there, like the sun for me this morning behind the clouds. It rose and it was there. And when it broke the clouds, then I could say, oh, there it is. But I needed that central visualization in order to drop into that place of certainty. There it is. The silence is a place of inner stillness and the source of divine revelation. The results of being in the silence are rarely experienced while in the silence, and that's very odd to think of. But rather, we experience the results of being in the silence when we're out of the silence and into our ordinary lives. And we experience the fruits of being in the silence as wisdom, understanding, peace, insight, love, and at one-ment. Spending regular time in the silence, in the state of non-awareness, non-thinking, non-doing, and non-sensing, reveals to us our Christedness, which then overflows as enrichment when we return to our physical lives. So how do we get to the silence? How do we cultivate this beingness, this consciousness? How, what is the secret? Ironically, we cannot try to get there. The moment we try to attain the silence, in that very act of trying, we are confronted with a sense of separation. The very act of trying indicates a belief that it is somewhere other than within us. So we would approach the silence initially as we approach any other time of meditation or prayer. We approach it through a series of preparations. Think of when you sit down and meditate. There's a certain rituals that you go through, certain acts to turn your mind from the outer to the inner. I invite you to do many of those during a prayer time during our service. And those include relaxation, to relax your body, to notice where there's places that you are holding tension. And then to say to those places, peace, be still. There's the closing of the eyes that focuses our attention, it refocuses our attention from the outside to the inner. There's a letting go. Our daily word today spoke about letting go of distraction, letting go of false beliefs, letting go of presumptions. And then, of course, I ask that within a preparation for meditation that one becomes receptive of opening one's mind and heart and being to newness, to surprises, to an inflow, to an uncontrolled influx of energy. With this particular method, though, of going into this type of meditation for accessing the silence, many of you have already experienced it through centering prayer. And that is to be in relationship with a word, such as peace or oneness or spirit am I. that when we go into a meditative practice, that in the effort of calming our mind, that we go back to this this word to bring our minds back to a focus instead of going down rabbit trails, bringing it back. Myrtle Fillmore wrote, "The silence is like the sun. It is always shining. It brings forth the best that is within us, the image and likeness of God, waiting to be realized and brought forth." And so I would like to move forward into meditation at this point. So if you join me now, we'll practice this entering into the silence. And so, as I just now outlined, if we take a deep breath and minimize distraction by closing your eyes. And just allow that breath flow to move in and out at a regular pace, at a pace that is comfortable for you. And letting all mental distractions fall away. And if you would decide for yourself what kind of anchoring word you would like to create for yourself, whether it be peace or oneness, I am, spirit am I, whatever would bring you back. And then to allow the outer world to drop away. Allow your focus to shift from sense to spirit. And every time you feel your attention wavering, to come back to your word, your centering word. And so we'll experience this together for several minutes. Going to the silence is not a practice of addition, rather, it is a practice of letting go. It is a practice of elimination, of eliminating distraction, eliminating preconceived notions, letting go of beliefs, letting go of process. It is a process of opening and being, of nothingness, of non-doing. And in this non-doing, outside of in our physical lives, we find that we have at our disposal a whole new way of being in the world, a way of being in the world that informs and supports our doing in a balanced spiritual way.
In the silence, there's a sacred place, a secret meeting place. Love is there. In the silence, where every color blends and every rainbow wins. Good is there. In the light, now you find that you know peace of mind. In the silence, your path is paved in gold, and all your dreams unfold. Love is there, peace is there, good truth is there, spirit's there.
This morning, while I was preparing my talk, I was sitting at the table and putting my thoughts together. It was interesting. I was putting my thoughts together about the silence, about how to speak about the silence, how to describe it, how to explain it, how to get across the subtleties of being quiet and going to the silence. And it occurred to me, Patty, why don't you just take some time out and go to the silence? And so I did. I left my writings, I left my thinking, I left my doing, and I sat in a chair in the living room with the sun by then streaming through the window, and began with the normal meditation preparation like we did just a minute ago. And then there's a point, because a question comes up, well, how do you know when you've entered the silence? The silence is non-awareness, but it is alertness. And so in that experience, I did have a word, and there was a moment then that all awareness seemed to disappear. And there's no time or space in spirit, so I have no idea. I will call it a moment, but I have no idea as to the length of time that occurred. And then suddenly I came back to a consciousness that was almost like waking up. And it struck me that, oh, that was silence. Of all the practice I've been doing, I haven't ever come to that moment with the realization, oh, that was it. And yet I know I wasn't asleep, but I was non-aware. And so for yourselves, when you're engaging in this practice, that might be helpful. That when you're in it, you're unaware of it, but when you come out of it, there's a sense that you had just totally checked out. So I just offer that as perhaps a help as you're trying to get your handle around going to the silence and what it might feel like and be like. Well, now we come to the point of our service where we bless our love offerings. Some of you may have those offerings in your hand right now. And if you do, that's wonderful. And if you hold that, or if you hold in mind the tithe that you would like to offer today for the support of our spiritual community, and those tithes and love offerings can be given in several ways. They can be mailed to the church. They can be dropped off at the mailbox in front of the church. On our webpage, there's very easy, convenient tools through PayPal and Giveaway that your tithe can be easily sent in. And so I appreciate in advance, I want to thank you for your generosity in light of our upcoming taxes. And so let's together embody our offertory statement. Divine love, expressing as me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I am. And now Adam will conclude our service with a closing song, and then I'll be back briefly for a benediction. So thank you for joining us today.
Please join me from home. And let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, a peace that was meant to be. With God and freedom, united all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment, live each moment, peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Well, thank you again for joining us this beautiful Sunday morning. And I think from what I'm seeing here on Hood Canal, it's promising to be a whole day of sunlight and perfect weather for a walk or sitting out on the porch or in your backyard. So take full advantage. I hold you in my heart and blessing for a glorious day in whichever way you choose to use it. May you be filled with love and light, and know that what you feel you're seeking, you can stop it now because you are it already. And it is ours not to not to find, but to accept as truth. And so it is. So have a great day. Bye.